This is the aftermath on Wednesday from a rampage by Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank, where officials say at least one person was killed and another critically injured. They burned cars and buildings in several villages in apparent retaliation to Hamas's killing of 4 Israelis near a settlement the day before. Resident Noman Shalabi says he saw it unfold.
Dozens of settlers came here, around 250 settlers. They tried to enter the courtyard. They set the cars on fire. They started shooting towards the house, using live bullets and stones. And they damaged the balconies.
The Israeli military also said it used a drone to strike a militant squad, thwarting an attack. In response, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, quote, "We will not accept any provocations to the police or security forces." This all comes after an hours-long battle between Palestinian fighters and Israeli troops in Jenin earlier in the week. Mourners from this series of attacks laid to rest the victims on Wednesday, including an Israeli teen who died in the Hamas attack and a man who died in Jenin. There is no safe place in the camp. At any minute, there could be a raid, his wife said, underscoring the volatility in the Israeli-occupied territory. The most intense fighting in months comes after days of relative calm. So far this year, more than 170 Palestinians, mostly militants but several of them civilians, have been killed by Israeli forces. 24 Israelis, as well as a foreigner, have been killed in attacks by Palestinians. Palestinians have repeatedly complained about settler attacks in the West Bank. Both Egypt and Jordan, which have diplomatic relations with Israel, have condemned the most recent ones. Some senior ministers in the Israeli government are calling for a full-scale military operation in the West Bank. Meanwhile, Netanyahu's office says Israel is doubling down on the Eli settlement with plans to add 1,000 new homes.
Email exchanges from inside the BBC, they talk about the risk of violating Indian laws. It's easier to rake up the freedom of speech debate, but does it give anyone a free pass to knowingly violate the law? America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. The UK is looking at the Indian subcontinent to fill its coffers. That India seems to be negotiating from a position of power, like a partner and not a former colony. The US and Russia are dangerously close to an armed conflict. This year, 2023, New Delhi will be the capital of global diplomacy. For a country as diverse as ours, with 88% of the population illiterate, it was a very big deal to write a constitution, and that too, the world's largest. Meanwhile, if we may, here's a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC. A list of suggestions for the BBC for their upcoming documentaries. Number 1, the Kohinoor and the colonial loot. Number 2, an outdated monarchy and unhealthy obsession with the royals. Number 3, racism in 2023. We're waiting.